Hi, and welcome to Second Rate Film School. I'm Andrew.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Jacob.
All right, today on Second Rate Film School, we're starting our next theme month since it is now late July, early August. We're doing Stephen Sommers movies. But that is the sole reason why we're doing this. We're going to eventually do The Mummy Returns and Van Helsing as well. So we're doing all these movies just because of a pun name. I hope you enjoy. So our first movie is 1999's The Mummy, and we're actually going to be doing this a little differently than usual. We're just going to be doing a discussion because all three of us are currently spread around the country right now, and we can't actually all watch the movie at the same time because this movie is surprisingly difficult to stream, which is a shame. So we're just going to be giving you our general discussions about it. So I guess let's begin. This personally is one of my favorite movies. I love it. Just the swashbuckling, cheesy action of this movie. I think the entire cast is great. I think the motives and like the storyline is great. I think it's the perfect summer action movie. And back when those were like really unique, and we can discuss more as we get into the sequel and Van Helsing, Stephen Sommers style, and then compare these with the various other Mummy movies as well. And I think it's a very unique portrayal of the Mummy franchise or the horror movies in general.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of my favorites too. Probably one of the better action blockbusters of the '90s, I think. And looking back on it today, I was kind of realizing just how novel the idea was. Just the concept of merging this horror idea with an action adventure sort of feel, like a Raiders of the Lost Ark combination. And I think that's, I mean, you see, it's pretty commonplace today, but back then in like the late '90s, that was very, very unique. I think that definitely comes from Stephen Sommers because as a kid, I think he saw the original Mummy, and he always wanted to do an update of it. But this was
Yeah.
just a pretty inspired idea. I think he described it as like Jason and the Argonauts and Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the villain gives the hero a very tough time. And he said he even didn't know if it wasn't so much a horror movie because there was humor in it, and some of the actors didn't. I think Brendan Fraser said he didn't know what kind of movie they were making for sure. He didn't know if it was going to be an action movie or a horror movie or a romance movie. So but I think it's a testament to Summers and his vision because it came out in a very cohesive, satisfying way. I think it's a better Indiana Jones movie than probably the fourth Indiana Jones film.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And that's coming from someone who loves the fourth Indiana Jones movie.
What's not to love?
I agree. I agree.
So I have a bit of a more controversial opinion on the
All right,
movie.
we're muting Jacob right now.
I like this movie. I don't love this movie, but I like it. I've seen it twice now. I've actually only watched it, I think, once when we were doing the ICLA program. I think I watched it for the first time, and then I watched it with you guys in preparation for this. I like it. I think the reason why it's never fully connected with me as much is because I always wanted it to be a little bit scarier, if this makes any sense. It's essentially a very straightforward Indiana Jones pastiche sort of thing, which is cool, and it does it very well. But for something that's kind of predicated on a horror subject, horror monster, I always wanted them to push the horror elements a little bit more, but it sort of grounds itself in action adventure pretty strongly and is a lot more lighthearted than I would like it to be. And I think that was what always kept me from really loving it.
That's fair enough. I know originally when they were developing the film throughout the '90s, Clive Barker was going to do it, and he had a much darker pitch. I think this was when they wanted to do something for like 15 million or so, a lot lower budget. Clive Barker had like a darker pitch. I think Imhotep worked as like a museum curator, and it seemed a little bit more like a Hellraiser to me.
And you know what? That sounds cool. But I'm okay with it being like an action adventure film. But I wish that they had pushed those horror elements a little further, because that's sort of what makes this character and this franchise unique, is that it's a horror character sort of in this action adventure story, but it plays it sort of like a straightforward adventure villain for me. And I always wish the emphasis, there's obviously like scary elements with like the beetles and how he looks monstrous when he first appears, but I always wish they pushed that a little bit more and did something a little bit scarier with it.
I can agree with that. I think this though did what the what was it, 2016, 2017, the Tom Cruise Dark Universe Mummy tried doing, because I think that's a complaint a lot of people had as well, where it wasn't scary, that they were going more action movie. I think
you know what's funny? I'm thinking of it because the new version of the Mummy with Tom Cruise shares some similarities with the classic 1980s movie Life Force. What's weird is I recently rewatched Life Force, and I was thinking like, not that I wanted the Mummy to be like that movie, but I was thinking how that was like kind of at the end, like sort of a big action film when it gets to the end, but predicated around like a really scary subject. And I almost was like, I almost kind of wish the Mummy was a little bit closer to that tonally. Not again, Life Force isn't a great movie. The Mummy's a better movie than Life Force. But I was sort of like, it would be cooler if they predicated it more around a stronger horror element like that. I think that would have fit better with the subject of the movie.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. This is when we can start diving into the, I mean, I did a little bit with the Tom Cruise version, but the different interpretations of the Mummy, specifically the Universal versions over the years. The original Boris Karloff version from the early 30s is actually very interesting because it's not really a horror movie in the classical sense compared to the other Universal movies from the time, and even the later sequels of the Mummy. Because essentially, for those who haven't seen it, he's the Mummy at the very beginning. There's some pretty horrifying images of people being killed that they had to censor for re-releases because it was the 30s, of people getting impaled and whatnot. And then when he comes back, after that iconic opening scene of where he wakes up, he's resurrected and goes off. Boris Karloff is almost just like a schemer. He's kind of almost like a Charles Manson, almost like having other people doing the killing for him through possessing people and all that. Yes, I just did compare Boris Karloff to Charles Manson, Jacob.
That's the pull quote. The mummy is like Charles Manson.
Boris Karloff Mummy.
Yeah. But like he's more of a evil genius. So it's interesting because I don't consider that, like, I mean, I don't look at any of the original Universal monster movies from the 30s anymore and be like scared. Like, I know that's a thing from like the Greatest Generation and whatever the hell the generation before them were terrified of that. But it's interesting how from Universal's inception of the Mummy, they weren't really sure what to do with him. In the sequels, it's actually interesting that in all the sequels Universal made, Imhotep is not a like Mummy anymore. It's a different Mummy named Karis, and they tried changing course direction, and that could be due to like it being in the later cycle when they wanted to make bigger monsters. And he's almost like a slasher. He's a slow moving. He's kind of like almost a proto Michael Myers or Jason, just moves very slowly, somehow always catches up with the people he's chasing, and does have a lot more horror elements. So it's interesting that Sommers took the interpretation and inspiration from the probably what could be called the driest of the Mummy movies they made.
I don't get it.
I meant driest, like just like in terms of lack of horror.
I thought you were making like a sand joke.
No, that wasn't a joke.
Yeah, I was being quite literal with it.
Oh, sorry. I thought we had a good comedic pause there for a little bit.
No.
Okay.
That's I mean, it's like you said, Jake. That's like the inspired part of the movie, is doing it as an action adventure film instead of just doing a straight up horror film, and it kind of helped it have its own identity too.
Yeah. See, that's why I'm more lenient towards it. I think Jacob, you make a good point about it not leaning towards the horror elements, but I think the Mummy concept does lend itself to the more action adventure aspect, given just the nature of the story. It's there's an art, and it's archaeological.
Oh, absolutely.
It's dealing in ancient times, so So yeah,
Absolutely.
but no,
I just wish they grounded it more in more horror elements. I think that would have helped it be even more unique unto itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else.
You know who's really good in this movie? Brandon Fraser.
I was rewatching it today to get like a little bit more like when we watched it recently. This was like a month and a half ago because we didn't think we were gonna be delayed this long in recording. So I'm like watching it again to like really get reacquainted. He's very charming. I think he's the perfect type of actor, giving the perfect type of performance. And considering he didn't even know what the hell type of movie they were making, really did a great job at doing the character well.
Yeah, he fits the vision of the movie perfectly. Takes it seriously, but not too seriously. There's still humor in it and everything.
Yeah,
He's
gives
always
like
very earnest.
Yeah, very earnest, very humorous performance. Not to just repeat the exact same thing that you just said, Jake. He's very charismatic. He's got a lot of energy, and he makes you really believe in the material, while also not taking it totally seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I always use the example of like when he first comes to face with the mummy, he does a literal double take, goes whoa, and then like when the mummy screams, he screams back and then fires at it with a shotgun. Like that is, as a child watching that, like because I don't know how old you were when you saw it, Jake, and Jacob, you were like 21, 22 at the time, so like very different times. I saw this when I was like 6. It was the greatest movie ever made, as far as I was concerned.
I saw it when I was 7 or so.
I remember wanting to see it, but I never did until I was 21. I don't know if it's the greatest movie ever made. The Mummy Returns might be the greatest movie ever made, but I guess we're going to discuss that at another point. But Brendan Fraser, I mean, I think he's a very underrated actor in general, because he's been good in not just like these blockbuster type films, but he's done like dramatic roles very well too. He's got more range than he's given credit for.
When he actually recently, a few years ago, was in History Channel did a mini series called Texas Rising, and it had like a really decent cast. It had him in it, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who people now know from The Walking Dead as Negan, had Bill Paxton, shortly before his death, and it was a very well done series about the founding of Texas. Picks up with the Alamo, and then goes into the rest that your average person doesn't know. And Brendan Fraser plays a real life figure. He was like a kid who like family was like killed crossing west and then was taken in by like a Native American tribe. So he's like decked out in like Native American wardrobe, talks like, them because that's all he knew because he was a young kid. And like, he plays a stoic, badass very well. And it's like, when I described it to someone, it's like, oh yeah, Brendan Fraser plays a Native American warrior. Like people are like, oh, that sounds like the dumbest thing ever, but like he pulls it off.
It sounds like canceled.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's like he's not supposed to actually be Native American. He was just taken in by the culture, but he does it very well, and it's a very dramatic role. And it's like it's a lot of silent acting on his part. He doesn't talk a lot. He doesn't have a lot of lines. It's just like a very good performance by him.
Well, it's kind of because I know other actors were considered for the part. I think Kurt Russell was considered.
Yeah.
And Bruce Campbell was.
Also was.
Yeah, ironically. I mean, the usual names of the hottest names of the time and everything, I'm sure. Like when the names were on with the usual list, but I think Brendan Fraser was.
Did you ever see that interview Brendan Fraser gave when the new Mummy came out, and he was like talking about like, it's back then, I think kids now want to see like the kids of today want to see like Tom Cruise or something like that. That's funny because it's like Tom Cruise is older than you, Brendan Fraser.
No.
Very nice guy. Well, I think I heard Leo DiCaprio. Now I saw it on some trivia. I don't know how true this is, but apparently Leo loved the script and wanted to play Rick, but he was caught up filming The Beach, so he couldn't commit to it.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Now, I would love to think that's true. Just the fact that Leo loved the Mummy script and wanted to be in it. That's why I would think that it's true. But on the other hand,
sorry, you go first.
Oh, well, on the other hand, I think he could have handled it well. I think he could have pulled it off, Leo. But he's a little too young, and he doesn't quite fit that mold I think that they were going for.
Yeah, I don't think young Leo. I think now Leonardo could do it. Like if they wanted to try and reboot the Dark Universe again, I think he could do it. But yeah, I'm just picturing him like only like a year and a half removed from Titanic. I can and that GIF from the beach that everyone's seen of like him walking like in a video game or whatever the fuck that movie is about. Yeah, I can't imagine him doing this. It really is a testament to Brendan Fraser, and you hear it all the time when you hear these alternate casting choices. People always say, "Oh, I can't see anyone," but fill an actor who actually did it. It's like I think a lot of time you can't see any other actor except the one that ended up being cast just because that character as that
Yeah.
person. But I truly don't think anyone else could have done. Maybe Bruce Campbell, I think, could have been the only other one to like have done the machismo, but like balance the action, swashbuckling, and comedy. Like I think he's the only other person who could have done it.
Yeah, it's always hard to know for sure, but you can't help but think just the alchemy of movies, just why they work is where every element just happens to go right. And if one thing's off, then maybe the whole movie falls apart. So I'm sure Bruce Campbell could have done a great job, obviously, or Kurt Russell.
You know what it is? He does he brings Brendan. I mean, I can't speak to any of those actors because obviously, those versions of the movie don't exist. But what you look for when you have like a lead actor in a role like this is someone who will take a very straightforward role, and this is a pretty straightforward leading man role, and just like bring something extra to it to help elevate it and make it a little stronger. And I think he really does that. What's funny? I was talking about the movie Avatar recently with a friend, and we were talking about how the character, I'm blanking on his name.
Jake?
It's like Jake Scully or Sully
Jake
or
Sully.
something.
Yeah, Sully.
Yeah. Jake Sully is written very well on paper. But the actor Sam Worthington doesn't really bring any like dimension to it or anything that's not really already there in the paper. He just plays it very straightforward.
Yeah.
And I think actually it makes a good contrast to something like Brendan Fraser in The Mummy, where Brendan Fraser, again, takes a very straightforward role, but he brings a lot of energy and humor to it and like just edges it up a little bit, and that's not to be taken for granted.
Yeah.
Now, as good as a lead is, I think we could also transition into the rest of the actors who are associated with this movie. I think all do very good jobs, with what they need to do and what their various roles are. So why don't we talk about some of the other actors as well?
We got Rachel Weisz.
Yeah, I think she does very well in shows. She plays that character so well that when they recast her in the third one with Maria Bello, which that might be one of the weirdest casting changes I've ever seen.
Because no one else wanted to do it.
Yeah, we'll go from a brunette English woman to a blonde American doing an English accent, but sure, why not? But yeah, no, she does it very well.
I haven't seen the third one. I think you guys had to explain to me that she was the same character.
Yeah.
I always figured it was a thing where just they said Rachel Weisz died off screen, and then he just got like a new wife in between. It was like I thought it would be a Transformers 3 thing with the Megan Fox, Rosie Whittington.
Yeah, I can't remember.
What?
Huntington Whiteley?
Yes, Jake, you get the gold star today. Rosie Huntington Whiteley.
Yeah, I've tried blocking all the Transformers movies out since you guys have forced me to watch them.
So would it be a thing
Their favorite pastime.
So maybe in the third movie, Jake, maybe you thought like Jonathan calls his dead sister a bitch or something.
Yeah, it's like in Transformers 3 how they explain Megan Fox where the little robot is like, glad that bitch is gone or something really terrible like that. I figured they just did the same thing in The Mummy 3.
Yeah.
Well, I just assumed that Rachel Weisz called Stephen Sommers Mussolini or compared him to like some like lesser tier dictator, and that's why she wasn't in that one.
Oh yeah, we all know Stephen Sommers. That man's a monster.
Yeah, but I think going back to Rachel, she's great, and I think she does very well. But in the first one, we'll get into it more when we talk in the second one. And as much as I like The Mummy Returns, spoilers, it's not nearly as high up on the list for me in terms of favorites. But I think in the first one, she balances her earnest character. It's very clear that she says drunkenly in the one scene, she's like, "I'm a librarian." That she doesn't get to go out too often on these expeditions, that she's always wanted to do this, but she's kind of in an era where it's like, one, women don't get to do much, and two, she's arrived and worked her way up at a time where all the big stuff had been discovered. You look at the timeline of this movie, we're already a few years past King Tut and all that good stuff. So she's kind of hamstrung like between the era of being a woman, and a lot of stuff has already been done. All the big stuff has been done. What is she to do? So she's earnest. She hasn't really been out in the field, but she knows like how to manipulate people. Like when she's like de-escalating the American team, and then Rick and Jonathan's gunfight, she's like, okay, we'll go somewhere else. She's able to outsmart them to know to go below the statue and whatnot. I think it's a very good character for her.
Yeah, it's very well done character.
They've already discovered all the major things except that one really major thing, I guess.
Yeah. I'm thinking of this like is in our real world. Like this, I think this takes place in 1923. That from the beginning of time up to 1923 is the exact same timeline, and then this is the fork in the road. So I think World War II doesn't happen because of this now.
Oh, because of Imhotep fucked the world up?
Yeah, Imhotep fucked the world up, so like Hitler's like really like freaked out, or maybe it actually escalates it because the Nazis were into like mystical stuff. So it's like now he's like, I know I'm right. We got to go to Egypt now.
Ashwash for the power of Arnold Vosloo.
Or the Scorpion King.
That's my German.
There you go.
Well, also Rachel Weisz and Brendan Fraser have fantastic chemistry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, those two are fantastic together. It's either with that it either works or it doesn't in movies, and it really does there.
Yep, I agree.
So well that they have a kid in the second one, but we'll go into that when we talk about the second one.
So when we get into that, we'll point out that the math doesn't make sense, so I don't think that's really his kid.
Well, that's more the third movie.
Yeah.
Because like Brendan Fraser and his son are like the same fucking age.
No, like in the second...
Like off screen, she revealed that she had a child from another marriage.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing. Like,
what?
That's the thing, because they say like...
Or he had the child in the other marriage. We don't know.
Maybe.
Because we never saw it, what happened.
Yeah, well, they say in the movie how old their son is, but they also establish how many years removed from the first one they are, and it's like he would have been like a year old, or she would have been like 4 months pregnant or something. Like the timeline doesn't actually work out, so one of them is a step parent.
They had a one-night stand 4 months previous to the events of the movie, and they did not make the connection until after the adventure was over.
That's why he was in jail. He was looking for a good time and got a good time. Remember, that's why Brendan Fraser was in jail.
I do, and that's the scene where Brendan Fraser nearly died in real life.
Yeah.
Oh, is that where he like accidentally like hung himself or something? Or
yeah. They accidentally like strangled him, and luckily it didn't snap his neck. They just almost strangled and stuff. Like, that's the thing, you always hear about these movies, and I think like Brendan Fraser tells the story that like the stunt guy's like, oh, you joined the Mel Gibson club, because that almost happened to Mel Gibson, and I know that almost happened to Michael J. Fox on Back to the Future 3. Michael J. Fox puts it as, he's like, it took them a while to realize I wasn't that good of an actor. But it's like you always hear it's like these guys are almost strangled. I wonder like why is it like, what do they do differently that it doesn't work like an actual hanging where they just snap their neck? Like just imagine like Stephen Sommers like, okay, action, and then just like you hear a snap and Brendan Fraser
just swinging back and forth.
Oh, Brendan, at least he's suffering in it early.
Oh God, no Doom Patrol for you, Brendan.
Oh. But yeah, I think he described it as it was like a silent movie where just the iris closed out, and that's that happened right before he became unconscious. And I think Stephen Sommers and Brendan Fraser like have different stories where Fraser's like, I was taking the direction of my director, and Stephen Sommers like, oh, he did it. It wasn't me.
I didn't even want to make the scene.
Well, that's the thing. I was listening to the commentary, and Stephen Sommers seems like a nice guy, but he's like deflecting a lot. He's like, God, he's like literally saying these extras are terrible. They were making this so difficult to like do. It's a great commentary. I think you guys should all check it out if you have the DVD, because it's between him and the editor. Oddly, you see like director and editor commentary, and you think that's a weird choice, but like the two of them are like longtime friends. By like that point, they had been friends for over 12 years. Like they met in college. So it's like our banter, you know, between friendship and all that. So it's actually a very interesting commentary track. So
well, that's interesting hearing the editor's perspective, because I think they always have a very, very viable one that's very overlooked in the process.
oh, for sure. So
But plus, Sommers just seems like a cool guy. It's like a
he
big
does.
kid almost.
That's the thing. Like it wasn't malicious. Let me be clear. If it's like it's not malicious, it's like those fucking actors. I hate them. It's just like saying it's like, oh, this is like really difficult. Like, you know, he's not like trying to be like PC with his like, you know, commentary tracks. You hear like a lot of commentaries are just like very vanilla. It's like it was great working with these people. He's just like, oh no, this was like fucking hell to film. Like every other story he has, he's like, this was difficult. We were like passing out. This was so difficult. Like we're exhausted. I don't even know how we finished the movie.
Yeah, well, apparently they had to film in Morocco for 6 weeks, and they did get it done in 6 weeks. But apparently to keep them from being dehydrated, I think the production had to create a drink for everyone to drink every 2 hours so people wouldn't suffer from dehydration. Plus there were scorpions and snakes and everything. And I think Brendan Fraser told a story where there was like a yellow spotted snake, and he was to be careful of it will kill you. He was taking a piss one day and saw it and just got the hell out of there.
When you also looked at, like, they're all fucking wearing like, you know, button-down shirts and slacks and like all that. So like they're wearing like formal attire and they're out in the middle of the fucking desert. That had to be hell to do.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. Well, continuing on though with the characters, you know, we got the comedic relief of Jonathan and Benny, and this is actually very, you know, rare. And I think when you have two different comedic relief working actually very well together, yeah, they don't share really any interaction, but they work very well, you know, in their different formats of the cowardly, you know, sidekick, and then the cowardly sidekick, but to the villain, so he's conniving, you know, he's, you know, the only time he ever injures any of them is like he punches Rick when Rick isn't looking and stuff like that. So, you know, he's a very Weasley guy. And, you know, Sommers even said he wrote the character of Benny specifically for Kevin J. O'Connor. Like, he's like, I knew when I started writing this, it had to be him in this.
Well, yeah, it's because they worked together in Deep Rising, which is a very good movie. It's a cool movie.
I always wanted to check Deep Rising out.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. What was I going to say? Oh, well, I think what makes Jonathan and Benny very different, I think you made a good point where those two characters could have canceled each other out. I think the fundamental difference between them both is I think Benny's the cowardly one, and Jonathan, despite being the humorous kind of side character, he isn't cowardly. So that might be the thing that distinguishes them.
He reminds me of, and I know this isn't a sound.
Yeah, it's actually, I think that's a good analysis of it, and that's why that character doesn't grate on your nerves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He reminds me of almost like a scrappy dude done right. He's like very just like, oh, I'll do this, but then like he knows his limitations. So like he's like he talks tough shit or whatever, but he realizes like, okay, Rick and them are gonna have to do the majority of the fucking like work here for me. But you know, he does it well. You don't think he's gonna go running away and be like, fuck my sister, I don't want to have this. I'm getting the hell out of town. Yeah. You know that he's gonna do the right thing. If he were on his own, he would probably die and the world would end. But you know, he would have gone down fighting at least.
Well, yeah, no, that's a good observation too. The other fundamental difference is that Jonathan cares about his sister Evelyn.
Yeah,
those two seem pretty inseparable, and they go everywhere together. And that's, I think, again, your brain notices those things, but now that we're breaking them down, it seems to be why that character works. At least one of the reasons.
It's also great that he's like a con man too. That like, you know, like it's unabashed how he keeps trying to con people throughout the movie. Like he doesn't become a better person. Like by the end of the first one and the end of the second one, he's still just like a schemer, but like a very
didn't they said something like that where they were like, he's the one character that's like consistent across the two movies. He never really learns anything, but that's the joke.
Yeah,
I think the filmmakers might have said that.
Exactly.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, that's like the comedic side character that really works, where the humor really lands. Like I said in the National Treasure commentary, Riley doesn't always work. His jokes don't always land. But the Jonathan character, I think it's always on point with him. I think that's not trying to belittle Justin Bartha. Yeah. But that actor who plays Jonathan is pretty great. Plus, I think the character's written well enough too. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, you got to give him even more credit because, he's acting through a very heavy Scottish accent and then do a British accent. So he's got to do an accent on top of all this shit. So that's pretty impressive. He's doing this quick-witted dialogue and like crazy action scenes, and you never, as far as I can tell, I can never hear his accent slip either.
Oh wait, he's Scottish?
Yeah, if you watch the like special features, he's got a very heavy Scottish accent.
Oh, I guess I can hear that.
Interesting.
I can kind of hear that now.
I guess his last name is O'Connor.
No, that was Benny.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah. No.
Which guy here has only seen the movie twice? See if you guys can guess.
Well, and I think since we've gone from all the sidekicks. Oh wait, we didn't go through all the sidekicks. We didn't talk about Ardith Bay, the Magi.
Well, yeah, that's the name of the original mummy who Boris Karloff plays.
That's a very good nod to him as well.
Yeah. Except the spelling's slightly different.
Yeah. But he's actually a very good character as well because he could also, like how we talked about the comedic foils canceling each other out, he could have potentially, because he's a really good badass and all that, like, it's a shame that he gets sidelined for most of the second movie as well, for good chunks of it at least. Even though he's with them, like he doesn't get to do much. That he could have been really canceling Rick out a lot more, and he's able to have the definition of, I'm the badass, but I'm able to fill you in a little bit more on like the history of this and explain shit. So he's like the exposition fairy, but like also like a badass one on top of that. So he's not just like, hey, these mummies are bad, let me move off to the side for the fight scene. These mummies are bad, I'm going to actively participate now.
Yeah, I mean, he's a noble character. The whole idea of the Magi is to protect people from reopening the Imhotep's tomb.
Yeah.
So I think that's where that comes from. But in the second one, I think he's given more to do in that, even though he is with them for a while. I think the B plot is him getting his army to confront the army of Anubis.
Yeah. He's with them for like 2/3 of it, but then like the climax really is like he's detached from it. And we'll get into the problems that movie has. And at rewatching, because I also watched it today, I'm like, oh, there are a little bit more problems in this than I thought. But
that second movie is like the coolest movie I've ever seen. But I don't want to talk too much about that before we do the one about that.
Exactly.
It blew my mind.
Oh no, I have a very funny story about that with a different roommate who, when me and Jacob watched it, that was the first time he had seen it as well. So stay tuned.
I think that was the first. Wait, are you talking about back in ICLA?
Yeah.
I think we only watched the first one there because the first time I saw it was with you guys.
Oh wait, no, yeah, I did show it to him.
Showed it to Mitch. We'll get into that when we watch do the second one. That's a funny
how
story.
Great the second one is. I'm just like, yeah, the first one's pretty good. Can we get to the second one? Spilling over into this.
Yeah. Well, and then I guess going on to the villain now, Imhotep. I think, as I've gotten older, I've actually respected the writing and characterization of Imhotep a lot more, from, as a kid, I'm like, oh, he's just the bad guy. It's like, he's actually a pretty complex villain. And it's very interesting. He's not actively trying to take over the world, or at least that's not the viewpoint I have watching the movie now. It's, I'm going to try and resurrect my girlfriend. And if anyone stands in my way, they're going to be dead. And if the world descends into an apocalyptic landscape, so be it. That's not my problem. He's very like focused. He's almost like Thanos. He doesn't care about, everyone else. It's just what is his goal and how does he accomplish it?
That's perfect. Goal we understand.
Yeah.
Got it. That's what's nice about it.
Well, I know Arno Vosloo said before he accepted the role, or when he talked with Sommers, he said the only way he could do it is if he could play someone who was passionately in love. Since, obviously that's his goal, so I've obviously understood the character. But yeah, I always thought that was very interesting too. He's not just an evil guy. He's just a guy just trying to bring back his girlfriend.
Well, it shows
Arno Vosloo, good actor too. Yeah. He does good. He's appeared in like a lot of like, what is it? he's been in a bunch of Stephen Sommers because he was in G.I. Joe, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
He was.
Destro.
I'm looking him up. He was Zartan.
Zartan. Okay.
You know what's funny is that Zartan, his character was the villain, the main villain in the second film, but he was in disguise as Jonathan Pryce the whole time. So Arnold Vosloo only appears like a couple times.
Yeah.
But he's technically the main villain of that film.
No Stephen Sommers, no Arnold Vosloo. They come together.
But he was also he was Darkman in the the TV sequels to the movie Darkman.
Yeah, he's very. And this is a psych reference to anyone who watches it. There's something very Billy Zaney about him.
Which is funny because
kind of cool.
Which was funny because, as we mentioned in the Phantom commentary, for some reason Billy Zane has that on his Twitter bio. He's like, "I was not the mummy."
Yeah. It was funny because when Arnold Vosloo was cast, because he has a very limited wardrobe in the movie, he's like in a thong or something like that.
He's got like like torn up robe, pretty much.
Yeah, he said that he had like a beer paunch when he first got the part. So I'm just trying to imagine Arnold Vosloo with like a paunch.
Just walking out with the thong.
Yeah.
All right, I'm the mummy, guys.
All right, Rachel.
He drops his jaw and just like has a burp because he's been drinking.
I love because there's a few times where he had no idea what the fuck they were talking about in terms of like the direction. I think when they were on the sand dunes and he's and what. Remember obviously the part with the sandstorm and the mummy face and everything. Arnold Vosloo said Stephen Sommers was directing him. He's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know where I look, what I'm supposed to do. So Stephen Sommers was just directing through a megaphone saying, look this way, then do that and that. And Arnold Vosloo said, I'm never going to work with him again. He's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Oh yeah, no, when he was in the motion capture suit, they said, what do they tell him? They said when your character's the skeleton is like the newly resurrected mummy. It's like a special effects reference. They said you walk like, wow, shit. What did they say? You walk even when you're in skeleton form, you walk the same way that when you're in human form. And Arnold Vosloo is like, I don't know what the fuck that means.
That's great. Like, I guess we call it look over here direction.
Yeah.
This is very random, but in the behind the scenes for Star Trek Nemesis, there's a great shot of the director of that movie who's like directing like a bunch of like a crowd of people sitting at a table, and he's just like tapping on the table going like, I want you all to look over here, looking right here. All right. It's amazing. And that was the direction for the scene. That's what I think of whenever I hear stuff like that.
Okay.
Look over here and do the thing.
Well, yeah, Stuart Baird, he definitely directed a movie after that.
He ended up, I mean, he came back because he edited Casino Royale, if I remember correctly.
He was he's a great editor. That's how he edited a lot of the Martin Campbell films. He edited The Mask of Zorro. He edited GoldenEye. And a lot of movies in the 80s, actually. I think he was like the go-to editor doctor or whatever they called it. So he was like the industry's go-to guy back in the day.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. But that's another subject.
Yeah, but going back to Vosloo and like not having any idea what he was doing, and like Sommers really having to like be like, hey, look over here. I did not know that. I mean, he is able to like give a very good performance. Like I believe he's controlling that wall of sand and like knew exactly what he was doing. So
it's very
and
incredible.
I think it goes back to the comparison to the Boris Karloff mummy more than anything is like his scheming nature. Now he's not nearly as much of a schemer, hands off as Boris Karloff was, but he's got his plans and he's trying to get it done. And, it's very much in direct contrast to the Karras Mummy series where, again, like I said, he's almost like Michael Myers, like just like a brainless, being controlled by evil priests in each movie. And, even though the end goal is the same for Arnold Vosloo Imhotep, Boris Karloff Imhotep, and then the Karras one of get my long lost love, reincarnated. He and Karloff, meaning Arnold Vosloo, have the intelligence behind it, have like the heart and soul behind it. You know, and as we get into the problems of Mummy Returns next time around, you know, that movie did a great disservice to his storyline until the very end, at least in my opinion. That, you know, you feel that all this again is him being like, I'll do whatever I need to do to get the love of my life back. I'm going to be a genocidal maniac if it means it, but I'm going to do it no matter what. And it's like you feel that conviction in him very well. And I think it makes, like I said, it makes him a very interesting villain.
It's just, you get it.
Yeah.
Wants to bring his girlfriend back. You know, determined to do that no matter the cost. Makes sense. It's a clear motive. Got it. It's great. It's not very muddled. It's very straightforward, and you understand what the villain wants. That's just great.
Exactly.
Yeah, that needs to work if your movie's called The Mummy.
What was the motive of the Mummy in the 2017 Mummy reboot? What did she want again?
World domination.
I don't.
I know, and like they have this big flashback at the beginning that she's like killing people so she could get power. But it's like when she comes back, that's thing. I don't remember what she wanted to do.
I'm looking
like
this up.
Yeah, she like wanted to take over the world, I guess. And that's the thing. It's like I don't know. Like, you know, they were teasing at the end of that movie that she would be back. You know, they're encasing her, and you know, like, in like it's lead or like whatever it is. That, you know, she'll be back at some point, you know, like when they were going to do their, you know, Avenger style crossover, but it shows you it leaves virtually no impact on me. I know I've only seen that movie one time, but
so I'm reading Wikipedia right now. The Princess Amenet attempted to summon the deity Set. She was caught and mummified alive. Amenet's mummy escapes from the sarcophagus, feeds on people to regenerate her body, and seeks to use Nick Morton, Tom Cruise's character, as a vessel to be possessed.
By the dead guy or whatever.
Captures, strikes her down. Amenet remains dagger, but there's also a gem. So there's like a gem and there's a dagger. But you have to shatter the ruby, I guess, the gem. And then Dr. Jekyll wants him to be possessed, wants Nick Morton to be possessed. And then at the end, I think he does get possessed. And they put her in Mercury. And that's the motive of the Mummy in the 2017 movie.
Oh.
When you break it down to its simplest thing is bringing back person A wants to bring back person B, whether it's lover or for power, but it's like, again, it shows you that the Sommers and then the original Karloff version, it's like, you know, that have borderline the same plot with it, or motive at least, you know, can do it so much better because it's like, yeah, that, you know, movie left such a little impact on all of us. And I think Jacob is the true control here because prior to like last month when we watched this again for preparation for this, you had seen the 1999 Mummy as many times as you'd seen the 2017 Mummy, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure you probably remember the 90s Mummy a little bit better than that one.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't think I like the 90s one quite as much as you guys, but I don't even think the new one was in the same league.
But what I'm saying,
the new one was like more interesting as like a test case in terms of like the bad traits of modern filmmaking. Like I was thinking about stuff like that more than I was like watching the movie than the story of the actual movie. With the reboot of the Mummy, I mean. Yeah. Like this is a solid, a very solid action adventure film. It's the best Mummy film that has been made from this franchise.
I agree. I mean, the original is fine. Going back to that, but I forgot to add that it almost is like Dracula 2.0, where the plot, at least from what I remember, is a little similar to the original Dracula.
It's truly the same plot. You know, it's even got the opening score to both of those movies.
Yeah. And then they even have like similar powers and everything. Both are in love with a woman.
Both hypnotize.
Both hypnotized with their eyes. Yeah. Both take place in about three 3 rooms.
Yeah. And even the guy who plays isn't the guy who plays Van Helsing and Dracula?
Yeah,
Isn't he also in that one too?
same actor. Not same character, but the same actor.
Yeah, same actor. Yeah. Well, and I mean that's
He was working the stage across from us.
Yeah.
that was a thing you see as we've seen watching all the Wolfman movies and all the Frankenstein movies. Is they really reuse those stable of actors over and over again. It's like Dwight Fry's in like 5 of those movies. The same Burgermeisters are like the same guys in each one, even though they're decades apart. I don't think they're supposed to be the same actor or same character, but like they're just like, you played a mayor before, you could do it again, right?
I get real actors troupe vibes from those movies.
Yeah, it's back when they had contracts. So it's like, hey, Mr. Man, you have a contract to make 55 movies with Universal Studios in 5 years, so get working.
And 45 of them are going to have the Wolfman in the title.
I like the I don't know. Did you guys ever watch the Hammer horror mummy films?
No,
I have not actually.
Yeah, those as a kid I really loved. I think I watched one of the Karras films from Universal as a kid, and then I remember watching the Mummy Christopher Lee one as a kid too, and I loved that one. That was like what I wanted out of a Mummy movie. So years later, I was a little disappointed with the original Mummy. It wasn't just a monster mummy walking around killing people, which is not the worst thing in the world, I guess. But
that's kind of what that's my thing. That's why I've always appreciated this movie, the 90s Mummy movie, but I never loved it just because I always wanted it to sort of embrace those scarier elements, because I feel like you can make a really cool action adventure film around a really scary subject like that, but it does play it. You know what? It's almost like watching Romancing the Stone at times. The 1999 Mummy, and that's fine especially if that's what they were going for. That's just what I think made it so I like it more than I love it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So is it more of a personal preference thing for you then, or?
I suppose so, but I personally think it would have made it a better movie. So take it how you will.
Okay.
And I think it goes to.
I think it kind of waters the material down by playing it as just a more straightforward action adventure thing, without those horror elements being more strongly ingrained. Like I said, they're in there, but they're played pretty softly, and it's not really the focus of the movie in any regard.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely focused on being an action adventure thing first.
Yeah. No. And I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like I'd have to look into it a little bit more. But I feel that Stephen Sommers is as we've seen, with this the Mummy Returns to extent, and then with Van Helsing, which we'll get into, he very much has a love for the classic Universal monster movies. So I wonder how much of this was also, those movies weren't nearly as scary for someone who's like a younger baby boomer who's growing up in the 70s watching this, compared to someone a lot older when those movies were, crappier pants, terrifying level. So I wonder how much of it could be, well, these movies didn't really scare me. I like, the cool monsters, like, oh, that's horrific and all that. He didn't want to make it too scary because to him, the original movies weren't that scary. So I wonder how much of it was his interpretation of the scary level versus what actually was intended.
I think they just wanted to make it like an Indiana Jones type film.
Yeah.
I think that's more marketable, and you get the PG-13 rating by not making it too scary. Yeah. And I'm sure they were passionate about making an adventure film like that.
Could be.
On the filmmaker's side, but that's what I always wished it embraced a scarier core to base all the action and adventure around.
Well, and it goes to, though, like I said, with my theory, especially when you see Van Helsing, it's a love letter to the original Universal monster movies. He one of the things that Sommers was pissed off about with Universal is he wanted to open up this Mummy movie with the original black and white Universal logo from the 40s. and they refused to let him do that. They're like, we want to have our modern. I think at the time it was the new logo. I think it was one of the first movies to have the new logo from. I think it used the 75th anniversary one for quite a while. I don't know that for sure though, but they wanted him to have that, and he was pissed off about it. And even the first thing he says on the commentary is, "Yeah, I don't like this logo." Like that's literally he's like, "Hi, I'm Stephen Sommers." The other guy introduced himself, and then they talk about how they don't like the logo that much. It's like
could have been worse. He could have had to use the Dark Universe logo.
Could have been.
Oh my god.
Well, you know what it was? Because that logo, I think, had just come out in '97, I want to say.
Yeah, so it's still
the Lost World.
Yeah, so it was, it was new and got to push it for a few years before you can start doing the variations, especially if it's a major tentpole like that.
Yeah,
but it would have been really cool.
Coverage on it. But I mean, from an artistic standpoint, it would have been cool.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, you don't see the variations of logos too often on major like tentpole for the masses. Like the only one off the top of my head I can think that even qualifies would be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and even then, that's Tarantino. That's a little bit different than trying to do a tentpole movie doing that. So I can't really think. I'm not going to claim that no tentpole movie does that, but I can't really think of too many that put the old logos before it.
You see them around
of like a major like tentpole.
Like Indiana Jones does that. It's weird, but I'd have to rewatch it. I think Dr. Sleep might have actually done that with the Warner Brothers logo.
Yeah.
It did. I just watched it. I was watching the director's cut, and then and then Joker did with the original Warner Brothers logo.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
See, on one hand, I think it's cool from an artistic standpoint, but on the other, I think to myself, stop trying to make a movie like you're in the 1930s or 70s. Like this is a modern movie at the end of the day. Just try to be consistent with that.
Ultimately, it's a throwback, and it is an element of indulgence, even if there is sort of an artistic intent behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I kind of, Jake, I sort of lean towards your opinion on this as well, even if it is, just the opening logo. But, all of this is still better than the Dark Universe logo.
Yes. Yeah.
Talk about putting the cart before the horse in that one.
Jesus. Yeah, I remember in the theater watching that once the logo went up. I think we both just went, "Oh no!" It's just like, "Oh god."
I remember seeing the original trailer, the trailer they did for the Dark Universe, and I hate the music in it, but I love just the compilation of the old monster movie clips, and it's I was really rooting for this to work because I'm anything that could get the original monster movies some love is fine by me. And I just then saw the logo and then the music they're trying to put over him. Oh no, this is gonna be bad. Then I saw it didn't help that the first time I saw a trailer for the 2017 Mummy was the infamous they uploaded with the temp audio, so it was an omen of things to come. God,
I think we Jake, your reaction summed it up well, where you were like, I hope they continue this, just to see where it was going to go.
I really did. I wanted to watch the train wreck continue. To me, it was kind of this could be fun.
As soon as they set up Tom Cruise to be a mummy superhero, and it was going to turn in Russell Crowe's saying, sometimes you need a monster to fight a monster, and there'll be others they have to discover. And you're like, oh my God, they're going to do the Monster Avengers. That's when I was
that's what they were literally setting it up to do.
Bring on the next one.
Yeah,
it was terrible, but we need to see where this goes. This is going to be laughably bad.
Well, I think the next one was supposed to be a Bride of Frankenstein movie with Javier Bardem as the Frankenstein monster. So it's that would have been fucking really interesting.
With Javier Bardem as the Bride of Frankenstein.
Well, I think they were. Very little's ever been released. But
why would they do Bride? I mean, I don't know. Why would they do Bride of Frankenstein before Frankenstein? That's I don't know.
Yeah, that was my mindset. But I think what they were going to try and do with him is, or at least what I would hope they would have tried doing with him, which would have been interesting. So it probably wouldn't have been the thing they would have done with him. Was I think it would have been cool if they made him a closer to the book version. So he's the intelligent creature who's just distraught and disgusted with humanity, but has intelligence and all that. So I think that would have been a very interesting, especially then to contrast with the Karloff version, so it would have been able to set itself apart from the more famous incarnations, or screen incarnations at least. Because you really, other than the De Niro movie, I can't recall too many versions of Frankenstein where they try and go close at all to the original plot with the monster having any form of intelligence.
I love that phrasing, the De Niro Frankenstein.
It's too bad. That's like great casting in theory, but
I enjoyed that movie for what it was.
Are we talking about the Mummy or the De Niro Frankenstein?
The De Niro Frankenstein.
Not
saying it was great. Yeah. Like the Mummy is better, but I enjoyed it for the sort of big, kind of silly operatic version of that story that it was.
Well, I've only seen like parts of it, but like I've seen a lot of his clips. But it's like you know what? I'd like the new version of like what we've seen because I know there was a Cinemasker did a talking about they did a TV movie version that like I think starred Randy Quaid as the monster. I'll put it up on the screen if I'm wrong.
What?
And he tried playing it like intelligently and all that, and like I
am Frankenstein's monster. That's amazing.
I can't imagine cousin Eddie as Frankenstein, but like it's interesting to see like most versions portray Frankenstein as the bumbling mindless monster, and the only other version I can think of that gave him intelligence was I, Frankenstein, which was an interesting movie to say the least.
Well, actually, there is one which is my favorite. This just sounded really pretentious of me, but I think a very faithful adaptation of the character is in that show Penny Dreadful.
I haven't watched it. No.
Yeah, no, it's like a great show, but the Frankenstein monster is probably my favorite because it is actually like the closest to the book. But it's great for what it is too.
I did not see I, Frankenstein, but from what I've seen of it and like read about it, it seems like one of those interesting ideas. Like it seems like an interesting idea. Like, what if Frankenstein was still hanging around today?
Fighting demons.
And then someone did a ton of drugs and just came up with the rest of the story. Because doesn't he have to fight like some army or something like that of mystical creatures?
He fights demons in a war with angels. Like it's a literal holy war. And like they're fighting over him because the demons can use him because he has no soul to like birth thousands of demons on like in Earth or whatever. And then like I don't quote me on it. I'll put up the Wikipedia passage if I'm wrong, but I think like by the end of it, they try and do it, but they realize he has grown a soul. So he has a soul, so he can. The demon's plan doesn't work, and like it's a pretty weird fucking concept.
Okay. Armies of angels and demons fighting each other. That's very Frankenstein. That's typically what I associate that story with.
And then add Aaron Eckhart being all sexy and just put a few scars on him, and that's what you imagine the Frankenstein monster looks like. A sexy man.
I hate that song. Well, yeah, that original idea was like a comic. I think it was used as like a pitch. And it was actually kind of like a film noir thing where Frankenstein monster's like a detective in a sort of like gothic metropolis, which I thought was a kind of a great idea. That's what I thought they were making.
Yeah.
I'd watch it.
That sounds more interesting. But I'm always going to laugh at any sort of high concept that's just blank as a detective.
Yeah.
Frankenstein's a detective.
The Wolfman is
that's like a CBS show or something like that. They should have done Frankenstein on CBS.
Well, this was more like he looked like the Boris Karloff Frankenstein monster. Like there's images online you can look up. It actually looked really cool.
Well, because that's not a Universal movie, so they couldn't make him look like Karloff because that's trademarked by Universal for like another 30 years or something like that.
Yeah.
That's why, because that was all Jack Pierce. Frankenstein didn't look like that in any like previous incarnation or in the book. But
anyway, the Mummy.
Yeah, enough shitting at the Dark Universe for a little bit.
Well, what else is there to say?
I think we could go on to the plot a little bit more. Talk about things that work and don't work with it. Now, when I was listening to the commentary, a theme I kept hearing in the opening third of the movie, or the first third of the movie, is Stephen Sommers kept saying we had different introductions for these characters. So, like, Rick, the scene where he's fighting with the French Foreign Legion and Hamanatra at the beginning, there was supposed to be a scene introducing him, like who he was, what his backstory was, why he's with the French Foreign Legion. And then, with Evie and Jonathan as well, why are they there? And, with Jonathan and Evie, apparently, like in the scene when she's drunk right after the Magi attack, and she's going on about her father was a very famous explorer. Apparently, that was originally supposed to be a reference to, she was supposed to be the kids of, or they were supposed to be the kids of the guy who discovered King Tut's tomb.
Oh, yeah, I read that. Yeah.
That was like the original version. And it was going to be like, that was going to play into like, I guess, like how she's drawn to this stuff. And it's like, you don't need that. It's like, she's just a really smart person who's passionate, who accidentally discovers a curse like that. She's like, like I said, my joke earlier that this is the real world up until this point. That's like, they actually found the one fucking mummy that has a curse on in this timeline. And with Rick, I don't need to know his backstory, why he's in the French Foreign Legion. It's very ironic with the name. It's like with Rick from Casablanca. Like, they tried doing a sequel afterwards, like a book about him. Like, they tried doing like a book sequel about Casablanca years later. And like, well, let's explain why Rick came to Casablanca. Let's explain why he's here. It's like, you don't need that. He's just a roguish type who, just goes wherever the money is. And he's in it for the money, where he's a charming guy, but that's what all he is. You don't need to have a drawn out. Rick O'Connell was born in Wichita, Kansas, and came over here during the war. But you don't need that. I think it's perfect on its own.
No, the story is simple, and it makes sense that the characters are simple, with simple motivations and everything.
I mean, the only character we get a detailed backstory on is Emotep. Really, he's the only one who we really get deep into it of why he is the way he is, and I think that's perfect. It really humanizes the villain, and as like Jacob says, it's simple stakes. You know what he's in for, but we know why he's like that.
Well, yeah, it's set up for the plot. I mean, without the mummy's motivation, there's no plot.
Yeah, that's like his backstory is, the story of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I think it, I know Jacob didn't grow up with it, so it could be partial nostalgia on Jake and I's viewpoint, but it's like, I think it's just like a very solid, popcorn, great movie, and for what
it's actually nostalgia on my point. I'm nostalgic for the days when I hadn't seen it. That's the problem.
But it's like, you look at it, and I think, I saw The Mummy Returns immediately after, because I'd seen the first movie. It was like on HBO or something like that. I had then heard, because some friend of mine in school was a big fan of it. He's like, oh, there's a sequel. And I rented the sequel like that weekend. So it's like, I saw both of them back to back. And even as a kid, I didn't like the second one nearly as much. And then, the third one, best left unsaid.
Did you see the third one?
I've seen a good chunk of it. Like, I tried watching it, and I'm like, oh, this is tough.
Best left unsaid. Best left unseen.
Yeah, I mean, well,
I haven't seen that one.
Me neither. I still haven't seen it.
It goes, and briefly going into it, I'll get into when we do The Mummy Returns my problems with undermining characters and whatnot. But I mean, the third one, forget the fact that you couldn't bring Emotep back. I'm actually fine with that. But like changing it up, it's like what a lot of people had a problem with the Tom Cruise Mummy. It's like, you're taking it out of Egypt. Like, it's very weird that you're having a mummy movie that's like not at all connected with it. You change up, like the rules of this movie. I mean, there's fucking Yetis in that movie at one point. Like, it's just so bizarre, and it just like doesn't get what the characters are. Rick O'Connell, like one of his first scenes is him fishing, getting pissed off about retirement, and then like shooting in the water to get the fish. And it's like, you're turning him into a cartoon character now. You're taking the guy who, was charming, a little cartoony with his like, screaming and doing double takes and all that, when he first sees the mummy, into turning him into like the cartoon version of him like that. And the literal Saturday morning cartoon show of the mummy didn't have him doing stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I didn't mind the idea of it being about a new mummy. It just, if you got to make another one, I actually like the idea of it being a different mummy from a different culture. I like the idea of
I
an
don't know about
Asian
the
mummy.
different culture, but like I'm fine with it being a different mummy at least.
I like expanding the world and not. I like the idea of expanding the world beyond just the same locations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I liked how they got out of Egypt, but it looked like the execution was
Yeah,
pretty
like I said,
bad.
it felt like they didn't understand who the characters were anymore.
Yeah, well, that's a problem in and of itself. And I think they wanted to do another one. They wanted it to take place in South America with like a Mesoamerican mummy or something, which I think
I
would have been
I would
cool.
prefer that over the Chinese one because I think also part of the problem is it's not only a different setting, it just feels like a different movie. Like they're all in coats, they're freezing. Like it just doesn't feel like the Mummy movie. I think it still needs to be like an action adventure. So that would have worked. I think you're right, better in South America.
I
See,
think
I'm still low.
they should have just gone for it. Bit the bullet and just had it be an American mummy.
An American mummy.
Yeah, an American mummy. Freemasons experimented in the occult, and they have like a mummified George Washington or something like that. Or no, we got to find a more villainous. It'll be like Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr's a mummy.
I have to say, side note,
They got to team up with Emotep to defeat Aaron Burr. That's what my version of the Mummy 4 would have been.
I have to say, side note, one of my favorite shows for like an ironic sense was Fox's Sleepy Hollow. And Jake has watched the pilot with me. I love that show. The first 2 seasons are great. They're over the top, cheesy fun. The last 2 seasons suck. So I don't watch the last 2 seasons. But the premise is it's a retelling of Sleepy Hollow in modern day where Ichabod Crane fought for the American Revolution. The British were fighting with demons. And like it's just crazy insanity. And now like the demons are in present day like America. And at one point they're looking to fight the demons and they're like, oh well, we need our own creature like a golem. And they're like, oh, Ben Franklin was working on one. He was stitching together the body parts of dead American soldiers to make the ultimate super soldier. And then one character says unironically, wait, are we saying there's a Frankenstein monster on the loose that we can use? And they do. They create Ben Frankenstein's monster powered by lightning, and it's fucking great. And that's what that plot should have been. The Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, it should have been like that. That's what the Mummy 4 should have been. It could have been some big National Treasure-esque conspiracy involving the Founding Fathers. Like, oh, they only have one way to defeat the British, and you have to harness the power of Emotep and the mummies.
It would have been great. I love that show. That's the next commentary track we're doing. We're just new commentaries on every single episode. It'll be great.
Well, I will not be present for that commentary track.
It is a fun, stupid show. I love it. And I will force you to love it.
Well, this time last year, you showed me the pilot, and my life has never been the same since.
Had you been here? Because we watched it on the 4th.
Now you're locked in a basement.
He flew across the country for me to lock himself in the basement to escape because I told him it's going to be our yearly thing. That if you had been here for the 4th of July, that would have been a fun thing. Every year on the 4th of July, we watch one episode of that show. So it's going to take like 30 years to watch through the first 2 seasons.
Oh, okay, so we'd be old men pissing ourselves once we got to the last season.
You think we're going to be old men when we're 46?
No, but I mean, weren't there like 30 seasons?
No, we're only watching the first 2 seasons, so that's 13 episodes plus like 22.
Yeah.
So we had to make it through 35 years.
But never mind.
Yeah.
It's gonna make a very morbid joke.
Go ahead, do it.
No, time's passed. It's fine.
But
leaving us hanging.
Yeah, but back to the Mummy 3. I think the worst part about the sequel limps past it a little bit with Emotep's
Back to the Mummy 3, a movie that 1/3 of us have seen here.
No, I think it goes back to what we're saying, the characters, and that's what makes it work the best. I think the second one has a few missteps in how they change characters. I think Emotep is the main one. Evie, to a certain extent, we'll get into that next time, but it shows you when you get to the third one, they really didn't know what to do. The Mummy character is not at all as interesting as Emotep. Brendan Fraser and Jonathan are completely different, or not nearly the same level. And, then Evie, the way they introduce her in that movie, she's retired, which I can't imagine Evie doing, and written a series of books. And you don't see her, and like a press conference is going on. They're like, "Oh, it seems like it's based on your character. The character is based on you. Is this character at all you?" And then they finally reveal her face, and she's like, "No, it's a completely different person. Completely like lamp shading that it's now a different actress." It's like you're really pissing on this character's grave now.
Yeah, I remember seeing that on TV, and I couldn't believe it.
They
Rob Cohen,
changed her, but
you went there.
yeah, Rachel Weisz was very smart. I mean, it would have been better, I guess, for her to get the paycheck, but I think integrity-wise, she knew not to do it.
Yeah, well, she came back for the second one, so I mean,
Maybe the third one.
I feel like it was like a little bit more relevant at that point because the third one came like 7 years after the last one, and
yeah.
it was like kind of like striking while the iron was still hot. So an element of that to it.
That is true. Plus, Rachel Weisz hadn't quite blown up even by 2001. She was just kind of starting. So I think she could, she probably got paid more.
Yeah.
And, raises her credit versus the third one, which is like you said, 7 years removed. She made the smart decision, but good old Brendan came back.
It's usually a good sign that it took him 7 years to figure out what the story could have been for the third movie.
Well, and the crazy thing,
real sign of inspiration.
With the first one, the day after it premiered, Stephen Sommers woke up from slightly hungover, supposedly from like the party, and like he had a phone call from Universal saying, "Make us another one." I'm like, they immediately like, okay, let's start. Now, it took them like a year and a half, but it's like they figured it out pretty quickly.
Well, yeah, because The Mummy saved the studio because Universal had suffered a series of flops. I think Babe, Pig in the Big City was like the last major flop, so they needed a hit.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely didn't do Pig. Get it?
What?
Is that a Shrek reference?
At the end of the first Babe, he's
talking about the movie Gordy.
Yeah. The farmer begrudgingly says, "That'll do, Pig. That'll do." So the joke is, since the second one flopped, that won't do, Pig. That won't do.
I thought it was just a pun.
No. Well, here's where my comedy comes to die.
That's where you're gonna put crickets in.
Just gonna edit it. Which, by the way, since we've been doing this via Zoom, we really haven't cut out from each other. I'm actually surprised. This is great.
Yeah.
I know. It's the total opposite of our Phantom commentary.
We actually don't work.
Phantom commentary was like I was in a plane in the war and it was crashing and I was trying to communicate with you guys.
Yeah. You're like George H.W. Bush.
Billy Zane going down.
Oh yeah, that was it. That was the whole commentary.
That's pretty much it.
Well, it's really great because if you haven't
words.
watched it, check it out. It's a great commentary, but like there are times because the two of them were at least in a room together. I wasn't, where we're talking about the same scene. They're agreeing with each other on it. I'm saying like complete 180 from what they're saying. So like we're nowhere near each other at all, agreeing or talking about the same.
It's like an exercise in madness.
Well, that
perfect for that period in time.
Yeah, when quarantine was new and still was horrific. Now it's just like, no, this is the world.
Yep.
As opposed to now. I was going to say as opposed to now.
Yeah, but now we're just used to it. Now we're dead inside. We know the quarantine will never end.
Well, off of that note,
I'd rather fight the mummy. That's what actually was going to happen in August. A mummy's curse is going to happen. That's what 2020 is setting up for us.
That's what those murder hornets came from. They were actually those scarabs or whatever.
Oh, speaking of scarabs, some interesting funny trivia. The actor who played the prison warden on when the scene where he gets killed by the scarabs, apparently on the day when he was doing his death scene, he chose not to wear any underwear for some reason.
Yeah.
I really don't know why.
Summer says on the commentary that originally there was supposed to be a gag where when he was crawling through the tunnel prior to that, his pants would sag down a little bit, so you would see a little bit of butt crack. So it was supposed to be a stupid joke, but every time they did it, it sagged down a lot further. So he's just full on mooning the camera. So they're like, that's a little too much. So they cut that out.
That's kind of funny.
Well, plus there's other scenes. Apparently when he was running.
So, but yeah, that led into that's why he's not wearing underwear.
Yeah, well, apparently the editor had to just edit around the unintentional nudity from that actor. But apparently, there's like 3 frames where you can't see something.
Yeah, his like dick just kept popping out because he's wearing like Middle Eastern clothing for that was period appropriate that didn't have belts on it, and yeah, he just kept popping out. And Stephen Sommers goes into it very well, saying we were almost shooting a porno by the end of it. Which what's Stephen Sommers' idea of a porno over like a heavy, sweaty Middle Eastern man just running around screaming, grabbing his head as it's being eaten by a bug? What are you into, Steve?
That's a
Tweet
snuff
at
film.
us. We inadvertently found out Stephen Sommers' sexual predilections.
Predilections.
Yeah, he's into some really weird shit. He also talks about on the commentary how in the boat scene they didn't realize the material was so sheer on Evelyn's nightgown, so when she jumped in the water, it was completely see through. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I didn't notice at all while we were shooting." And like apparently that added a lot of time onto ILM's efforts because they had to repaint her dress to not be see through to keep a PG-13 rating.
Also, there's a couple times of improvisation in that scene. The first was the gag where Evelyn saves Rick from the bullets that are hitting the wall and everything.
Yeah,
That was improvised on the day. And then the other one was when everyone's trying to get off the boat and everything, and the prison warden says to Rick, "What do we do now?" And Rick says, "Wait here, I'll get help." And then he dives off. Apparently, the prison warden diving off that was just made up on the day because Stephen Sommers didn't know how the prison warden was going to get off the boat.
Yeah.
So.
And that's I think that's one of the funniest jokes of the movie because like it shows like Rick still is pissed off at him for like trying to hang him. He's like he doesn't like him, so he's like, "Okay, fuck you, buddy," and like it almost works. That character should have been in the sequel. Like they could have brought him back. He was like possessed by scarabs or something.
Except he'd wear a belt.
Yeah. Well, that's like the interesting thing. Also, there actually is some pretty decent restraint for when they got into the sequels of when a character is dead, even though they have the Book of the Dead. Like they didn't bring like any of the side characters back. Like a lesser, I think, movie. I will give them credit for that. A lesser movie would have tried to find a way to bring Benny back, or bring some of the other characters back. I mean, they could have done like with the 2017 Mummy, Jake Johnson, comedic relief, dies off, and then he's like a ghost haunting him, because of the Mummy. They could have easily done that, and it's like that would have been fucking terrible.
The ghost of Kevin O'Connor.
Yeah, they could have easily tried doing that, and I know like in the Mummy Returns, they kind of half-ass at the museum curator, kind of filling in occasionally in comedic moments. But like they really don't have a comedic relief in that movie other than Jonathan. So it's like they could have easily tried doing that again, much to the detriment of the movie. Because I know in the cartoon they have like another Weasley character who fills in the Benny role that they felt they needed to have them. So I will give Mummy Returns props for that. They didn't do that.
Yeah, it was very good at not being a rehash of the first one. But we'll get into that with
next time. Yeah.
Yeah, next time.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think again, I know Jacob hates this movie. Thinks we're all assholes for life.
That's right. The guy that made you watch Bionicle the movie is going to sit here and criticize your movie.
Exactly. But no, I think it's a good movie. It's like it's not my favorite movie of all time, but like I try watch it at least once a year. That and The Mummy Returns once a year. I think it's very enjoyable. I think it's I know I see your point, Jacob, of it would have been nice with having the horror elements, but seeing it's the Mummy character in general is a good case study for horror movies because we've seen how multiple different interpretations of the character. You have the evil conniving villain who has the hands off, like the Karloff version. You have the Karras mummies that turn him into like a silent slasher. You have a kind of similar but more hands-on version of the 90s version, and then you have whatever the fuck the 2017 version was, and then add in all the other Mummy movies, like all the Hammer ones. It's a very interesting character to see how mummies as horror movie villains have been evolved and interpreted over the decades.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like I said, I like this movie. The thing I most appreciate about it is the genre turn it took by becoming more of an adventure film than it was like just like sort of like a small horror film like the original Mummy was. That was a exciting and smart reinvention,
Yeah.
and that's something that this puts this above, pretty much heads and shoulders above the majority of the other sort of more by the numbers remakes that you see of those Universal monster films.
Yeah.
Is that it does have like a real reason to exist, and I appreciate that about it, even if I wish they made it a little scarier and less just sort of like an Indiana Jones type of film,
Yeah,
like a very straightforward sort of one.
And I think the only other movie that's a remake of the Universal monster movies that is at all to this level, I think the 2010 Wolfman, I think, does a good job of reinterpreting the character in a different way. I actually did like it. There are parts of that movie that are very cheesy, but I think, going from the original Wolfman, which is in probably my top 5 favorite movies, it is a very interesting, how do you turn this movie that's pretty dry and very little action into an action horror movie. And I thought, they did a good job with that. So, it is possible to do these Universal movies. It just seems to be very rare that they're able to figure it out.
Well, I don't think that Wolfman remake is an action horror movie. I think it is like a horror movie.
I mean,
It's actually, yeah, it's that kind of what I was thinking of, where it's like a beefed up version of the original Wolfman. Whereas something like the Mummy is sort of like a whole new film and a whole new genre compared to the original. And I appreciate that they were willing to have the vision to take that sort of leap with it.
Sure.
Yeah, with the Wolfman, I mean, I think it succeeds in what you're saying, was on an aesthetic level.
I mean, they add in action,
fantastic.
More chase scenes, and then the final fight scene is what I'm like referring to more than you look at the original one. You don't really see him for the majority of the movie as the Wolfman, and then the climax is his father beating him to death, which is a very powerful for that arc. But they turn it into more of an action-y thing with this.
Well, I think Jacob said it best. They beef it up.
Yeah, and it's a shame because that could have been the start of the Dark Universe. If that was the start of the Dark Universe, I think it would have had a much better chance than what we got. And I know, like, supposedly Dracula Untold was potentially, like, they weren't committing either way to if that would have been the beginning of the monster reboot. And I think had Universal been smart, they would have gone like the way of the original Iron Man, where it's not until the end of the movie that they set up that it's supposed to be part of a cinematic universe. Just keep releasing these horror movie reboots until you find one that works, and then say this is where it's starting from, instead of betting all the eggs on Tom Cruise. I want my Dr. Jekyll and Russell Crowe.
No, but yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the Mummy. I like it. I just I always wished it was a little scarier.
Yeah. So thank you for bearing with us as we're trying something new. We hope you liked a more just general discussion. We will be going back to scene-by-scene commentaries at some point if we can figure out the technological gap between us. But, until then, we hope you've enjoyed this and continue to stick around for more Stephen Sommers when we do The Mummy Returns next week. Bye.
So long.
Look forward to me not picking the next few movies, guys. Have a good one.
September will be your month, Jake.
I eagerly wait in anticipation, along with no one else.